Hi, I'm Mike Wormsley. All great business leaders, whether at CEO, director or managerial level, have one thing in common: a real hunger to improve both themselves and their organisation. And I know that a lot of my own success as managing director of an international recruitment group was down to self-improvement, a hunger for new knowledge. In fact, it was one of the inspirations behind this leadership development programme. Now, in most training products, a single expert usually gives their opinion. But leadership is not as cut and dried as that. And, as you're about to see, sharing the experiences of a panel of expert leaders can be much more powerful. Every great leader knows how important it is to surround themselves with the best people. But even if you had the time to seek them out, it could cost you tens of thousands of pounds to assemble the kind of expertise that we've brought together for you in this programme. I'll be telling you more about my panel later, but let me start by saying that they were chosen to be reflective of our industry. Directors of small, medium and large recruitment companies, plus a psychometric expert and a leadership coach. Let me introduce you to the panel. Rosalind Payne, Managing Director of Personnel and Care Bank. Charles Walker, former Main Board Director of Blue Arrow and now a consultant to the recruitment industry. Alex Arnott, co-founder of Recruitment Training Productions. Richard Allberg, CEO of PSL, a specialist psychometric and assessment company. Graham Palfrey-Smith, founder of the merger and acquisition specialist GJPS.net. And Sesh Sukhdeo, specialist leadership coach. There are some fantastic ideas within the series. There are tips on improving communication, an insider view on enhancing the way that candidates, clients and employees view our businesses. And you'll see the secrets of self-development, as well as looking at how to maximise profit and keep cost firmly under control. Now, our panel were unanimous that we should start at the beginning. So that's where we'll start the discussion, by looking at the core skills of an effective leader. So, leadership is a huge subject. So let's start by defining what it takes to be a great leader. And Charles?
Well, leaders tend to be very entrepreneurial, big on the vision, very believable, lots of courage and lots of stamina. What we've seen in our industry, it tends to go wrong where the industry outgrows their ability, and this is why videos like this are so useful, because a good leader is never afraid of bringing in good managers to grow his business and ultimately grow his wealth at the end of the day.
Should there be a point at which a leader steps aside, Graham?
Definitely. The leader should define the vision, but in terms of the leader or the entrepreneur managing the business, you need professional managers in there, and this is where Charles is quite right. Our industry has been traditionally very weak in that. I mean, I wouldn't say you need to lose the leader entirely from the process or from the organisation. In fact, it's very valuable to have that person there, continue defining and refining the vision. But in terms of carrying out the processes and the controls and putting in the systems to make the whole thing happen as the business grows, you need to have professional managers doing that.
Are there different types of leaders for different types of businesses? For example, someone growing a business from 0 to 20 staff and then from, say, 20 to 100 and 100 onwards. Rosalind, what's your view on that? Are there differences between running those different sizes of companies?
I think there can be, but I do think somebody can do it themselves as long as they train and they grow and they really have a lot of input. So I don't think there needs to be one person has to come out of the equation and another one put in, because ideally you want to have a succession, and it can be somebody from within who equally has a vision but is very operational and systems orientated and that really grows with the business. So I don't think it has to be, but somebody might get to a point where they can't grow it any further, and then they need to bring outside assistance in.
And in terms of the psychometric profile of leaders, what sort of evidence have you got for us today, Richard? I mean, is there a clear definition of a leader?
I think there are several definitions of a leader, but picking up on some of the points that have been made, leadership requires vision, passion, focus, communication skills. There are a number of behaviours that are required to be effective as a leader, and I think, picking up on your point earlier, the larger a business is, the more leadership is essential, because when a business is very small, an entrepreneurial manager, an entrepreneurial leader can make that business because that business is largely them. As the business grows in numbers and there are more people who need to give effect to that enterprise, then those people need to know where they're going, how to work, how to be effective, and that's when leadership comes to the fore. It can be in an entrepreneurial style, it can be in a very upfront style, or it can be quite a reserved way, but fundamentally what you're trying to do is enable a lot of people to deliver on your vision.
Graham, you've actually run a very large business, and also in the early days not so large business.
They all started small.
How did you manage that growth in terms of you personally? What sort of skills and qualities came out of you as you became more involved in growing those businesses?
I think the ability to delegate things out, and the willingness to use external influences, as you mentioned in your introduction, the opportunity to actually gain from other people outside the company or outside the industry is very, very important. And because I'm a firm, total believer in leadership is about defining the vision, but carrying it out is the object of managers. That's what they should be doing, and you need to hire the best managers. So you focus on developing and hiring and developing and recruiting and retaining those people.
Good leaders are never afraid to check the foundations: vision, communication, and surrounding themselves with the very best people. Communicating your vision effectively can inspire staff to tremendous heights, and however much you invest in your managers, it's worth considering more, because they are the ones who can see your vision through. I think, Rosalind, you also mentioned about looking at yourself and training to develop through a business and carry on with your career as a leader. How many recruitment directors in reality do that? Charles, what's your take on that?
The spoken word and the written word is so crucially important. And it becomes more important the higher up a business you go, because you have to be able to articulate your vision and articulate your management style. And again, there are a number of people who have it all internally, but it fails when they try and express it. And these people need help, because they will become more effective managers and they will get more out of the people around them. And at the end of the day, nobody has the monopoly on wisdom.
I think in the recruitment industry, it's quite common for the leaders to have come from a sales background. Either as they've grown throughout the business or from their own particular background setting up their own companies. And I think sometimes a lot of salespeople aren't necessarily the best operational people, and going back to Ross's point, they need to train and adapt, because they can get left behind, and sometimes they feel reluctant to let go because it's their company, they started from the start, and they don't necessarily want to give that to other people.
Sash, as a leadership coach, what's your take on the percentage of people within the recruitment world who actually reach out in the belief that they could improve as leaders?
I would say it's not high. I'd say that looking at my own career, I'm probably one of the lucky people that managed to reach out. I probably had the guts and the passion to develop. Finding environments and finding cultures that allow you to do that. If you can appreciate that if you're working for an organisation, there's a particular protocol. You've got a training environment, you've got a particular way of maybe operating. And now you've got a particular entrepreneur or an individual that wants to develop leadership qualities. That skill may not be in that business. And I think the industry perhaps maybe needs to look at ways in which they can enrich their knowledge. There are very few people out there that would know who those people are that you can actually go and talk to, and there are. There are some very good people out there who you can talk to, who can guide you, who can be...
Are you suggesting some sort of forum where people get together and discuss leadership issues?
Perhaps, but I mean, I think the industry is... it is sizable enough to do so. There certainly needs to be some focus on leadership and mentoring and coaching. Should
a leader have a full-time coach? I mean, obviously Tiger Woods has Butch Harmon, who coaches him, and he's the best golfer in the world. Should the best leaders have a full-time coach? Richard?
I think it can be tremendously valuable. And I think there are organisations, there's things like TEC or the Young Presidents Association, where individuals can leave their organisation or the day-to-day responsibilities of their organisation, the politics, the different pressures, and talk amongst peers about what they're trying to achieve, how they're trying to achieve it, and possible solutions to issues they face. That's one route to getting mentoring and coaching. Another one is more formal, where you have a mentor or a coach who's an individual who comes in to help you. But I think the benefits are immense.
But putting ourselves in the shoes of a company running, a leader running a small business, would they incur an extra expense to have a full-time coach? Rosalind, how realistic is that, do you think?
If anybody is actually networking, etc., literally people can be a phone call away, and people don't actually use their competitors as really as they should do. I say not necessarily immediate competitors, but people in the marketplace or colleagues. And I think that needs to be done more. And there are ways in which that's very accessible at the moment through REC, through Team, different organisations. But I think one of the main things is that the leaders in any organisation, especially small ones, actually don't train themselves first or look for outside help first. All the money is spent purely on consultants, hard, possibly soft skills, and it's always consultant driven. It's not the leaders that should be giving it to themselves first.
Now, you talked about networking then, it's very interesting. When I had competitors trying to headhunt staff from my business when I was a recruitment managing director, I used to call the MD back and say, well, why don't we meet for a drink after work and you know, build a friendly relationship. And I think that if more people take that viewpoint rather than creating enemies, then of course you've got a networking friend for the future and with a direct competitor. Charles, how much networking did you do with direct competitors? Is that something that you advocate, or was it?
I think as an industry we need to do more, to be perfectly honest. There are so many threats and challenges facing this industry that we actually need to spend more time talking amongst ourselves and identifying the threats, challenges. It's not a new invention, networking, but it is very important that you're out there getting a feel for the marketplace and innovation and new ideas, and you only do that by talking amongst your peer group, but also those people who operate in a similar service sphere as you do, or suppliers to that industry or sector.
Alex, in terms of networking, what benefits have you experienced?
I think you can share, for example, legal costs, especially in smaller companies. If a particular issue has come up, you know, you can ask a friendly competitor what they've done, or if they've gone through that similar situation. If they have, you can share ideas and therefore keep your costs down. So I think that's a very powerful thing. And also, if you're taking on a consultant, potentially from another business, if you know the person there at a leadership level, they're more likely to be more honest about the verbal reference you take from them as well.
I mean, sometimes when we've been marketing our products to the marketplace and we've asked about networking to people we've sold the product to, they've said, well, I don't network because I don't want to give any secrets to my competitors. I don't want to help them. How realistic is that for you, Sesh?
I think it's something that does happen, as we probably all know. I think perhaps maybe another way of looking at it is how can we network to perhaps win business? And perhaps maybe there is opportunities where we can collaborate, where we can align, where we take perhaps maybe a particular major client that we're both working on. So for example, Rosalind, as you said, you know, you might have a particular strength in the industry, or one of your local branches may be particularly strong. Surely the client will benefit from perhaps maybe having two organisations making one approach, using one perhaps maybe set of standards and protocol rather than multiple contacts.
Yeah,
it's not just about the internal competitive aspect, but how can we use that for a win-win scenario?
Perhaps work together in some way. Charles?
Yeah, just picking up on networking, I think there's a danger of getting confused between networking and collaboration.
Yeah, true.
And I think as a business, as Sash has just said, collaboration is hugely important. And as far as the idea issue, people are frightened of giving away new ideas. Well, you know, I've been in this business for about 9 or 10 years, and there are very, very, very few new ideas.
Absolutely.
Basically, it's how you package and how you sell them, and most importantly, the margin you make off them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Most top sports people have coaches or mentors, and more business leaders are now following suit. It can be well worth paying to be part of a professional business group. And networking can be an inexpensive way to learn from peers from both within and outside the industry. It's interesting that some of the best leaders have coaches to help with their development. If that's beyond your budget at the moment, it may be worth considering joining organisations like Team or the REC, or perhaps networking with your peers to form your own discussion group, where you can develop by learning from the experiences of others. We're now about to look at the challenges that are faced by leaders on an ongoing basis, with particular emphasis on communication. What are those main challenges? Again, Graham, you've had experience of growing businesses to a very large size. What challenges have you faced as a leader?
Well, I suppose the first one is the fact that it's a very lonely job. which goes back to the first question, really. I mean, you do need to have some sort of support network there. And I, in my time, have belonged to various different groups, which at their time have been extremely useful for me. I tended to find that for a year at a time was enough. But other than that, there really are the business pressures. I mean, and the obvious ones of profits, costs, and cash. And that really should be the principal driver. Once you know where you're going, managing that is the absolute critical thing, and making sure you've got the best possible people. Those are the biggest issues.
Okay, so basically people and profits.
Yeah, people, cash and profits.
People, cash and profits, okay. You said you were members of various groups. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I was a member of something called Apex, and also Kite, which was a group of chief execs. There's a senior partner of Hillier Parker. He subsequently retired, so I can mention his name. The lawyer from Guinness, general counsel from Guinness, and various other people. So people at the very top of their tree who, for various reasons, couldn't necessarily talk about everything to the people around them. There were about 8 of us in the group, and we talked about everything. We obviously had to sign confidentialities, and you weren't allowed to invest in each other's companies and things like that. So that actually was tremendously useful, because it was the only forum I had. I mean, in most cases, most leaders, their only mentor or coach is their spouse. And that can be a massive drain on a relationship, as I'm sure everyone will testify to. If you're living and breathing it all day and all night, sure, it's very, very difficult. So it's useful to have that outlet. And it
sounds like you got free coaching in essence.
Well, it wasn't free by any means. It was very expensive. But
I see. It wasn't. You had to pay to be part of this group.
Oh gosh, yes, okay. Yes. I mean, it is expensive, but it's done properly. It's expensive, and I suppose there's an element of you get what you pay for there. I didn't pay my wife as much to mentor me. I'm true.
Can I just echo that, as someone who also pays a lot of money to be part of a similar group? It is invaluable, the returns one can get, and the effectiveness of being able to just discuss issues that, I think Charles said earlier in terms of the business, most problems we face have arisen before, and other people have faced them, and other people have come up with solutions. Being able to discuss them with a peer group without that competitive environment is extremely valuable.
Well, I was told the other day that Tony Robbins, the American motivational speaker, apparently has 6 clients, and he is paid $1 million a year by the CEOs of these organisations to coach them, and that he does 1 day a month for them. So, I mean, obviously some companies who've got that amount of money, they place enough worth on it, sure, but it just brings it down to a different level, and perhaps looking at ways that we could do that, Sesh.
Sure. I think the other thing we probably want to look at is recognising those people that can coach you in an organisation. And I'm thinking not just in the recruitment sector, but you know, I've, like probably many of us, we've worked for other organisations, and there are certain individuals that have certain qualities as a coach. And I'm thinking back as turning points in my career, and I sort of can picture those particular individuals. And one of the challenges when you're trying to develop your leadership skills is you perhaps can become quite naive to that, because you think you can do better. And you don't often realise that that person there potentially can be of assistance to you. And I've seen that myself, and I felt it. And there's a saying that you should never burn bridges, and I think that's extremely so, especially if you're looking for coaching and development, because those people are there. And I can count my relationships going back 15 years, where some of those people were my peer group are now CEOs of organisations. And it's quite interesting, as you said, where at one time you may have had to work side by side, perhaps where the relationship is slightly different. So there's a lot of experience that we can probably look outside of the recruitment sector, in terms of people that we can perhaps maybe support us with.
Absolutely. One of the challenges clearly faced by many businesses is when they grow from perhaps 5, 10, 20 employees. At that stage, communication isn't necessarily much of a problem, because you're very close to those people and it's a small family. But as it gets bigger, it can be an issue. Rosalind, what's your view in terms of that, and how do you manage that communication issue as your company gets bigger?
Well, I think it goes with, you've really got to keep asking what other people want within the company continually, how they want the communication delivered. Graham was talking about honesty and everything else. There can be a great deal of honesty that isn't actually there on a senior team, because if it's to a certain extent competitive, etc., and you've got people that can improve within the business, if they can be very given a forum to be very honest with what they think. And so communication can be very quick and efficient from the top down. It's a very valuable tool for people to really sit and concentrate on the senior team and draw things out from them and devolve them down.
And what about the communication from the senior management team through the company? Because sometimes as your business grows, whereas at one stage you may be talking to the consultants on a day-to-day basis, suddenly you're a bit more removed from it. Well, how much of an issue is that, Sesh?
I think it can be an issue, and I think we all have come across situations where communication's been distorted, or perhaps maybe the message hasn't been understood or delivered as intended. So that in itself can create barriers and perhaps maybe not very clear messages.
So how do we manage that?
I guess in a way it's as Rosalind has said, I think first of all what we've probably got to do is understand how we all communicate, understand how perhaps maybe people's minds think, and I'm not saying you need to be a psychoanalyst, but that people have particular preferred styles of communication. Some people may be perhaps more introverted than extroverted, some people may be more reserved. And I know that Richard, in terms of some of the work that he's done, focuses on tools that can perhaps maybe help bring teams together and also support communication.
That's interesting. Tell us a bit more about that, please, Richard.
Using assessment tools, one can help to elicit from a person what is their preferred style, what are their values, how do they like doing things, what behaviours do they have a preference for, and in that way try and understand what makes someone tick. And once you start to recognise that there is perhaps diversity within one's organisation, and because of that diversity, different styles, you can take that knowledge and use it for productive means, as opposed to having it turn into a cause of arguments. The other thing is, in terms of looking at whether the message has got through and whether everyone is singing off the same hymn sheet, things like 360-degree feedback tools, 180-degree feedback tools, looking at using attitude surveys, particularly with the development of web technology. Those types of techniques can be carried out inexpensive, quickly, easily, and really give you a flavour for how things stand within what may be quite a large organisation.
Leadership can be a lonely job, and it's well worth developing a support network. As Sesh said, your future support group could be your peers of today who add value as your career develops. Communication is a constant challenge, but if you set up open and honest communication channels with managers, they'll spread your message, and so it's crucial to understand the best way to communicate with each individual in your management team. We've come to the end of session 1. The very best directors and managers that I know have a clear and constant focus on communication. They're extremely concerned that every message they send to their staff is the right message. And they think very, very carefully indeed about what they're going to say and how they're going to communicate the message. Now, the most important issue for me in session 1 is self-development. And the reason for that is that so few directors invest time developing themselves. It's a key component of success. I look forward to joining you in session 2, where we'll start by looking at how to manage employee expectations.